Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. We're back for another season. We're starting off with Joe's preseason top 25 for college football. You'll see both of the rankings up here. Joe's going to do his in this video. I'm going to do mine in another video. So, Joe, obviously, we've got a big college football season upcoming. We're going to do a number of videos previewing more specifically the teams here, but we're going to fill in our preseason top 25s here. Hopefully, we don't have to look back at this at the end of the season and realize how bad these are. But, Joe, let's start in the conference that won the national championship, not just last year, but the last 3 years. There's probably going to be a lot from this conference in the top 25. That is the Big Ten. You've got a bunch of teams that are going to be near the top, a couple more maybe at the bottom. But let's start with the defending champions, the Indiana Hoosiers. Where will they be in your top 25?
I'm gonna have them ranked number four, Sean. I think kind of like, a lot of you listen for our college basketball podcast, kind of like the Dan Hurley UConn. You know, Kurt Cignetti, although albeit in 2 seasons at Indiana, he's become impossible to bet against. So I'm gonna have them, in the four, as in like if this was the CFP of four, they'd still be in my book. Right now, I think they're too big to fail, as in not make the playoff. I think a lot of questions are on Hoover, but I think it's a known commodity. Sound defense. You bring back both coordinators too. That's something not a lot of people talk about. I think there's plenty of continuity on this team to contend to go back to back. Not saying they will, but to certainly contend.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. I think you'll see them ranked very high in a lot of the rankings. Maybe not high enough by some. Let's stay in the Big Ten, Joe, for the team that lost to Indiana in the Big Ten championship and then lost to Miami in the playoff, who then lost to Indiana. The Ohio State Buckeyes. Julian Sayin is back. Ryan Day is back for another year, assuming they're going to be pretty high in your rankings.
I have them at number three. I think the big three for the third ranked team in my rankings is very stout. You have Julian Say and Jeremiah Smith and Bo Jackson, who I think had a phenomenal freshman year. I think, some people could get a critique. There were certain games he wasn't as, potent as you would expect, but I think he was also a true freshman. And I think with another good year from Sayin, I think the 5-5 rule is going to actually help Ohio State a lot more than other teams because a lot of their freshmen they probably would have sat just in interest of eligibility. All that's out the window now. So guys like Legend Bay, Chris Henry Jr., they're going to be fully unleashed and not on a snapper game count, which I think for teams like Ohio State that recruit at that level could be a very like underrated aspect that people aren't really necessarily focusing on, aside from the Jeremiah Smith angle, which Ohio State, let's face it, they always have elite talent, but I think elite young talent is something they're going to be able to take full advantage of now.
All right, Joe, we've got another team that I'm assuming will be in your top three that you mentioned. It's a team that returns their quarterback, Dan Lanning in Oregon. Dante Moore, the presumed number two pick in the NFL draft, chooses to come back to school. He's back for another year at the Ducks. They've got to be pretty high in your rankings.
They are the highest. They are right now number one. Now, I'm going to clarify they are not my national champion pick. I think as of today, in late August, Oregon's the best team in the country. Now, I think even with the Davison injury, not great news, but they should be able to sustain that. And with the D line depth they have, I think their D line talent is the best in the country, whether it's the edge or the interior. I think them and Texas Tech probably have that, but with the continuity and Oregon's and their depth, I'm going to give that to Oregon, which we've seen, Sean, is what ultimately wins teams national titles. Stout D line, the last five national champions have certainly had that, and maybe this is probably the best chance Dan Lanning's going to have in a while to get over that hump for Oregon, which they haven't done in a very long time.
Sort of like the team you talked about earlier, Joe, a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth from how last season ended. They did only lose to one team, and it was Indiana in rather lopsided fashion in Atlanta in the semifinal. All right, Joe, I believe we've got a number of more Big Ten teams in your rankings. Let's go a little bit closer to home for you.
Mhm.
Michigan, new coach, the all the Negative stuff seems to be behind them. New athletic director potentially, not the video for that. Um, are Michigan in your top 25? And if they are, where are they?
They're at number 15 for me, Sean. I legitimately think this entire team fringes on Bryce Underwood, whether they're a top 15 team that's competing for the playoff all year round, or a team that's just on the outskirts of the top 25 coming in and out. The offensive line's better. They return all five guys who are going to start have started in games together, like last year. Jordan Marshall, Savion Hyder, who might be one of the best freshmen in the country, a revamped receiving core, bringing back Andrew Marsh and bringing in J.J. Buchanan, uh, improved secondary. I think the linebacker core and the defensive, line depth is a bit of a concern, but upgrades all around. It's going to be on Bryce Underwood to take this team to the playoff. If he elevates his play, I think Michigan could be a top 10 team. If he does not, Michigan's probably what they were last year, which is ultimately a top 25 team, which last year, let's face it, Shot had a really easy schedule.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty high floor for Michigan, but at the end of the day, I think it is going to be tough for them to jump into that top 12 because at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to be in the top 3 in the Big 10 to make it. There is a world, I guess, if you want to get into the permutations and all that, where there is 4, but I'm not sure about that. Let's move on to another Big 10 team that should be around the same tier as Michigan. At least they are for me. Let's go out west to LA. Lincoln Riley and USC. Jaden Mayava's back for another year. Where are they in your rankings?
I have them at number 14. I'm a lot higher on USC, and I really debated them putting them in my top 10. What ultimately stopped me is just the amount of new pieces, but they're really good new pieces. You have guys like Alex Van Sumerman on the D line. Obviously, Bear Alexander's back. Jaden Maeva, I think, could be one of the best. I think he could be a dark horse Heisman contender, Sean. I really like the way he played in a lot of games last year, particularly at the end of the year when they were already eliminated from the playoffs. So I think USC. Sean, I'm gonna be honest. If there's 4 teams in the playoff for the Big Ten, USC's probably most picked to be that 4th team behind the top 3 we mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. They seem to be in this holding pattern where they've not been terrible, but at the same time, with the money that they're paying their coach and now evidently their players, they are going to want to take that next step. Is this the year? I think that question might be asked until the very last game, Joe, because there's a chance it goes down to the wire. Okay, Joe, we've got a few other teams, I'm assuming, in your top 25 for the Big Ten. Let's stay on the West Coast. Let's go up to Washington. Where do you have them in all this?
I have them like 17, so probably further from the playoff than, I kind of have, the team I have at 16, who we'll talk about later. On the fringe, like I think the top 16 are definite playoff contenders. Washington's like a team outside looking in. I like bringing back Demond Williams. I like a lot of their returning production on offense. It's ultimately Sean. Jed Fish in 2 years, I think's won. I don't think he's necessarily won a big game there yet. And in spite of it being a 2 year tenure, you know, you're judged on the Signetti curve, not necessarily national title, but instant, big wins within 2 years. Doesn't quite have that yet. So I think it's just the big game factor. I know they could beat teams they're better than. Jed Fish has proven to be a very good coach. Demond Williams, I think, forget all the transfer portal saga stuff, is a phenomenal quarterback. Gonna have to make better decisions this year, though, for them to win some of these big games.
All right. Staying back more in the traditional Big Ten for some of our older listeners, let's go to Iowa, a team that was sneaky really good last year. Took Indiana to the brink, took a bunch of teams to the brink, ended up in the top 25. Joe, are the Hawkeyes in your top 25?
They're at number 21. Again, I think more likely not a playoff team than one that's going to get in. The big question is, I think Mark Gradowski covered up a lot of their problems on offense last year. I think he
He's,
made Tim Lester's life, the offense coordinator, a lot easier.
he's the best quarterback they've
Um,
had in a long time.
yeah, and here's what I'll say. I think Iowa's the chocolate chip cookie of the Big Ten. Always solid, can be relied upon in a lot of games to play well. Chocolate chip cookie though isn't the winning dessert on the Food Network, for lack of a better term, right? So I think there's gonna going to need to be a little more oomph for them to make the playoff. But with Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz back, I think this is a team kind of like Michigan, you mentioned, very high floor.
I think, Joe, that for them to make the college football playoff, they might need to wait a couple years until there's 24 teams, because that would be tailor made for them to get in, you know, at 9-3 and all that. All right, Joe, we've got some other Big Ten teams at the bottom of your rankings here, all with some pretty big questions. First year head coach, and then two others that have um, not been terrible over the past few years, but maybe quite haven't reached the heights that they expected. Let's start with the Nittany Lions of Penn State. A lot of questions going on there after James Franklin was fired last year. A whole new staff, Matt Campbell in from Iowa State. How do you see things going down there in State College?
Ultimately, we're not going to get into a Matt Campbell hiring video like we have in the past. This roster is a significant downgrade talent wise from last year, and I don't think that's a shot at Campbell. I think it's just a testament for what I thought was a pretty good tenure that Coach Franklin had there for the last 12 years. Ultimately it's going to fall on the continuity from Iowa State, right? That's come over a lot of, I believe, over 30 guys from there. Rocco Becht, the quarterback, has been with Matt Campbell 3 years now as a starter. So, I think he's going to have to take on the role that Mark Gronowski did, not necessarily running wise, more in the cover up a lot of warts that you're going to have year one. I think the schedule works out well for them. My problem is, Sean, though, a 9-3 on their schedule versus a schedule like Michigan, Ohio State's, or some of these SEC teams, definitely not going to get them in. But Penn State, I think, is the most volatile team in my top 25. If you rate them at 12, I wouldn't really have a problem. And if you kept them out of this top 25 entirely, I wouldn't have a problem. I chose the middle ground.
And where are they?
22.
22. All right. Yeah, obviously could potentially be a little bit of unfamiliarity, beginner's luck with them. Big Ten is a league that is a lot of the same. Maybe that helps them. All right, we've got two other teams here, Joe. Illinois, Brett Bielema. Do they get into your top 25?
They get at number 24. And again, this is going to be a similar theme for a lot of these schools with transfer quarterbacks. Cade Caton Hauser come in there and, continue what's been a really good stretch for Illinois from 2023, 2024, and 2025. The former Michigan State and ECU quarterback. I think Bielema teams are what they are, Sean. Great defensively, solid in the run game. When they've had guys like a Luke Altmaier and even at times a Tommy DeVito type, right? Like in certain games, they play well enough. They could be a top 25 team consistently for the year, but I don't think they're quite playoff contender yet.
Yeah, I think at the end of these rankings, Joe, a lot of people are going to, not necessarily throw shots in the dark, but things could definitely go wrong for these teams. But if things go right, they get 9-10 wins, they're a top 25 team. So I think there's a lot of thinking there. All right, Joe, the last team in your top 25 also is from the Big Ten. PJ Fleck in Minnesota. Um, what was your thinking behind throwing him here in the last spot?
It's the continuity. PJ Fleck, made headlines, in Big Ten country saying we're the only school in the Big Ten with a returning QB, two coordinators, and head coach. I think Drake Lindsey showed a lot of flashes last year. I think my concern for him is I think his year was not necessarily overrated, more overhyped. I think he made his share of mistakes, but I think kind of like guys like Bryce Underwood or even a Dante Moore, who saw a jump in their second year starting. Um, Talking from UCLA, obviously Dante Moore. There has been a lot of growth, and I really think that PJ Fleck has probably never been more secure at Minnesota. Knock on wood. I think this is just one of the more stable programs in the conference and turning into the country. So I think this is a team that's 8-4 and probably in the outskirts of the top 25 come bowl season.
Seems like for them that a step up might not be super far fetched. They've been close, but not quite that not quite the 20 to 25 ranked team that many thought they could be over the last few seasons. They do have a big game early. Potentially that will see where exactly they'll fit into all this. All right, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, that is all of the Big 10 teams in your top 25. Let's save
Correct.
let's save the SEC for last. So up next, you could pick where we go, what conference.
Let's go to the ACC, a conference that's going to get a lot of slander and a lot of insults, and maybe rightfully so. But I think there's more good teams than not in this conference, especially this year.
And Joe, the top ranked team in the ACC is not going to be a surprise. Them not making the ACC championship last year put the college football playoff committee in a bit of a pretzel situation. It kind of ruined everything. Let's hope for their sake and the ACC's sake that they make the ACC championship game because they are the best team in the ACC. I'm talking about Miami. Where do you have the Hurricanes ranked?
I have the Hurricanes just outside my top five at number six. I think the Darian Mensah edition is getting overly complicated by a lot of analysts. I think he's an upgrade over Carson Beck, maybe not necessarily experience wise, but certainly talent and what you could do with your offense. Malachi Tony, one of the more prominent freshmen in college football from last year, is back. I think the defensive line, the offensive line, a lot of continuity there, and again, I think Mario Cristobal has. I think for a lot of these guys, like you've seen it, like when Dabo Sweetie finally got over the South Carolina thing, Harbaugh, the Ohio State thing, Ryan Day. Sometimes letting his defense give up too many points in big games. Once they get the metaphorical monkey off their back, you see guys start to roll and really maintain elite success. And I think Mario Cristobal is on his way to doing that, especially in an ACC. Let's face it, Sean, there's not been a legit contender to match them, or at least we don't see one yet for this coming season. So I think they can be, more focused on the national scene than necessarily just the ACC scene.
And I do, Joe, think that it would be a big, big surprise if they're not the best team in the ACC by a significant margin. Um, and I'm not talking about the team that plays a lot of games against the ACC that are also playing Miami. Let's go to the two teams in the state of Virginia. Multiple reasons why they're going to be in your top 25, Joe. Let's start with Virginia Tech. James Franklin brings over Ethan Grunkenmeyer, his backup quarterback from Penn State. Do you believe in the Hokies enough to put them in the top 25?
Yes, I certainly do. I think this is a schedule that works out well for them. I think they could ease into the season a bit. They do have a road game at Maryland, but I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of Hokie fans invaded that stadium. What it's going to come down to, Sean, is that talent that came over from Penn State and the recruiting talent, which we could see early on with a lot of guys. Can that immediately be an even bigger curve for the ACC to figure out? Like the Big Ten, let's face it, Penn State talent wise, they're certainly, and with Franklin's recruiting, maybe the third or fourth best team on a given year. And the ACC, that could be the best team on a given year. Now, certainly Miami's ahead of them just due to Cristobal's length of tenure. But I don't think Virginia Tech's that far off with the talent on their roster. And I think for years to come, I think they could give Miami and whoever else emerges in the ACC a big problem
All right, Joe, so they'll be in your top 25 where?
at number 20.
20. Okay. Joe, I believe that is it for the ACC for you. Oh, no, no. There's another
Nope.
team with a returning quarterback, was in the playoff 2 years ago. A little bit of a down year last year. SMU is in your top 25. Where are they going to be ranked?
SMU's going to be one above Virginia Tech, shot at 19. I love that Kevin Jennings is back. I really like Rhett Lashley. I think he was mentioned in a lot of major coaching searches last year. Maybe a bit of a distraction. Not going to speculate on that. But the point is, I think they have an elite offensive coaching staff. They have a quarterback back for his third year starting, and also a really underrated talent wise, like across the roster. I think it's probably the third or fourth most talented team in the ACC. And I think with the really good coaching of Rhett Lashley, I think they're a team that, could be a dark horse to be in the ACC title game. Don't necessarily think they will win it, but certainly could be a dark horse.
All right, Joe. Well, that is it for the ACC. Let's leave the SEC for last. Let's go to the Big 12. I think there's definitely two teams that people have seen at the top of their lists when it comes to the Big 12. You've got three of them in your top 25. Who is your pick to win the Big 12 and why over the other team that many are picking near the top?
I have Texas Tech. The So a big question is going to be how are they going to replace, or not necessarily replace, fill in the void that Brendan Sorsby was supposed to fill in, which was going to be a significant upgrade at quarterback. Will Hammond likely going to be the starter. I don't have any problems with Texas Tech other than their skill positions. I think they're, even Baron Morton last year, like wasn't a bad QB. It's just can they elevate? I think their roster is good enough to win the Big 12. It's just I have them at number 12 because they're not a top 10 team in the country. Trench wise, without a doubt, they're a top five team in the country if it was just that. But I think the skill position gap they have is still big enough. I think they're filling it in actually better at high school recruiting than the portal. So for years to come, I think they could be a perennial top 5 to 10 team. But for now, Sean, it's just that gap is a little too big. So I still have that number 12.
Yeah, they. I don't think there's going to be much of a difference from last year. They were very dominant in the Big 12, even won some games without their starting quarterback. But then when they faced Oregon, the lights were a little bit too bright for them, and they did not score a point. Defense held up enough to keep them in the game far longer than they should have, but they're still the best team in the Big 12, and that's why you've got them at 12. Joe, BYU is the other team that people are picking near the top of that league. Um, a little bit of I don't want to say let down last year because they still performed very well. They at the end of the season it was still a good one. But where do you have the Cougars from BYU ahead or well, assuming you think Texas Tech can win the Big 12, I'm going to guess they're below Texas Tech. But where do you have BYU?
I got BYU at 14, kind of like, funnily enough. Oh, sorry, number 13, my bad,
Yeah,
right above USC. Um, Bear Bachmeier, spec LJ Martin, return a decent amount of the secondary as well. They do lose the DC J Hill to Michigan, but I think a lot of that defensive success had to do with talent, not, criticizing J Hill, but I do think BYU from a talent acquisition standpoint is almost as elite as Texas Tech. Maybe not quite the funds, but they're getting there. And I think this is another program, Sean, that's going to be a perennial playoff contender, especially with let's face it, a pretty weak Big 12.
we have to remember that Kalani Sitake was a big time target for Penn State, and he was very close to being their next head coach. So BYU fans can be happy. They got an offseason win of their own by just keeping him around. So they are your second Big 12 team at number 13. Joe, you've got one more team from the Big 12. It is the team that former coach is now coaching your Michigan Wolverines. It's Utah. They decided to move on from Kyle Whittingham last year. It was an in-house hire to elevate one of the coordinators. Um, they did have high expectations going into last year. Didn't quite meet them. Where do you see Utah being ranked in your top 25?
I have Utah shot at number 18. I think Devin Dampier being back's a big reason why, but they returned 55% of their output from last year. For a team that lost its head coach and offensive coordinator, that's pretty rare. So, really and let's face it, when the head coach goes to a better program, in air quotes, such as Michigan, you see that roster get rated. Really didn't happen too much. They lose Henry Daly and Buchanan, and Smith Snowden, but a lot of that offensive line, Fano and forget the other one who went pro, but they do have more back, at the underrated positions, like the guys that weren't drafted or transferred than not. I think a lot of their freshmen stayed committed and, can make an impact this year. And also, Sean, I think Devin Dampier is going to raise a lot of their problems for a first year head coach.
Yeah, he had high expectations going into last year. Perhaps a little bit of a letdown, but again, maybe potential bounce back spot there for Utah in their quarterback, who was probably a Heisman shortlist candidate at this time last year. Maybe he can get back there this year. All right, Joe, we have a bunch of spots still to be filled in. One of them is not from a team in the SEC. Let's get that out of the way first. I'm guessing your group of five pick to represent them in the college football playoff.
At 23, I have Navy. I really like the job Coach Brian Newberry has done there. I think if Baylor does move on from Dave Aranda, he would be the number one candidate for Baylor. This is a coaching carousel video. Done a great job elevating that program. Was consistently like a 5 to 7 win program for a while now, getting into the the 8, 9, 10, 11 win category. Went 11-2 last year. Not a lot of people noticed. And really their losses weren't bad. One to Notre Dame and one to a pretty close game to a really good North Texas team that played in the American Athletic title game. So think they lose Blake Horvath, but I like Woodson, who's going to operate their offense a lot better, bigger, and stronger. And I think the defense, if they clean it up, they very well could be the group of five representing in the playoff.
Yeah, their offense is something that's really fun to watch because they still employ some of the elements of a military school's offense, but at the same time they're pretty explosive too. And they were able to hang with some of those teams in the American that also scored a lot of points. So they're at 23 in your rankings. Joe, that leaves 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 16. Um, all SEC teams. There's no question about it. The top 25 all year long is going to be filled with SEC teams. Now, logistically, it's probably hard for them all to stay where they are because some of them are going to win and some of them are going to lose. The last place SEC team that you have here, number 16, is a little bit of a surprise when I saw it. Let's go into why you have Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide at number 16.
It's just I think the biggest problem they have is just perception, right? I think they had a
Yeah.
phenomenal year last year, played in the SEC title game, beat Georgia, won at Georgia and Oklahoma, beat Auburn, and beat LSU. Like I don't understand how that could be considered a bad year at any other place but Alabama. Can they replace Ty Simpson? I think he was an eraser a lot. Can Ryan Williams get back to the first half of that freshman season? It's there. It's not a shot. It's definitely there. He has the talent. And can they run the damn ball? That's going to be the big question. There's too many questions for me to rate them closer to a playoff team than not. Like they're the cutoff team. I think Alabama's the last team in these 16. That's a playoff contender. So I'm going to trust Kalen DeBoer here because I think he's still a hell of a coach. What he did at Fresno, Washington, and even at times at Alabama has been really good. It's just going to be that schedule, man. Like that's going to knock him down a peg, unfortunately.
All right, let's go on to the next. If you're going up,
Mhm.
down your rankings, I guess, to number 11. Another SEC team is in there. Who's at 11?
I have the Texas A&M Aggies at number 11. They bring back Marcel Reed, bring back a lot of the production on offense. One thing I don't like, Sean, I think they might have been what people accused the Patriots being last year's schedule merchants. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate whether that's right or wrong.
They played the
I
bottom
think
seven
it's
teams in the SEC.
I mean, that's just a Shaw just stated a fact, guys. And again, I think Mike Elko's did a great job. I think the defense should be stout. I just don't know if they're going to be, as elite as the class of the SEC, but I certainly think they're a playoff contender. I mean, based on the best 12 teams, I think they certainly are like they're certainly closer to the top 10 than not based on this. And let's face it, Sean, I think Marcel Reed can take a big step up and, win them some games last year. Like, I don't think last year they certainly didn't beat Texas, but would they have beaten Georgia, Bama, those teams, Oklahoma? Probably not. So, I do think this year they're better suited to contend in all those games versus the debacle we saw in their last two games last year.
All right, Joe, as we go up the list, we've got still a bunch of SEC teams to go. The team at number 10 is from the same state as the team we just talked about. A little bit surprising to see this team so low. Why do you have Texas and the Longhorns at number 10?
I love the returning quarterback, right? I like that they brought in two starting running backs from the portal. But one thing, Sean, is Steve Sarkisian has proven time and time again in certain big games, he just outthinks himself. Kind of a symptom a lot of people accuse Lane Kiffin of having from that USCP Carroll tree. I think they both have it. I think Smothers and Brown coming in is going to help them on offense. But can they like score enough to even like compete in these games? Let's face it, last year, Sean, all three of their losses were blowouts. Georgia killed them, Ohio State statistically killed them, and even that terrible loss at the Swamp, that was a blowout. Like I think a lot of these Steve Sarkisian teams, as good as I think they are talent-wise on defense, especially with Colin Simmons, who's one of the best pass rushers in college football, the SEC you have to score still, right? And frankly, Sark for being the offensive genius he has, this is the year they got to show they can do that at an elite level.
All right, up we go. We've got 7, 8, 9, three teams. Let's go to. How about you just mentioned LSU. Lane
Mhm.
Kiffin coming over from Oxford to LSU. They have not been mentioned yet. They are one of these teams. Where do you have LSU ranked?
Yeah, I have LSU ranked at number 8, Sean. I think this roster is filled with talent. I think a lot of people are judging Lane Kiffin more so than the team itself. I think, bringing in Sam Levitt, they boost up the offensive line, headlined by Jordan Seaton from Colorado. And I like that they brought in Winston Watkins too from Ole Miss. Maybe it would have been nice to bring on K'Wan Lacey as well, but they do return a lot of the defense. They returned the defensive coordinator as well. So I think there's a lot of continuity on defense. And I think Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. with offensive firepower. I mean, most of Ole Miss's offense, particularly Trinidad Chambliss, was new last year. And I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They could figure it out with a guy who, coming into his schools, was a lot more highly regarded than Trinidad was.
Yep, so they're number 8, high expectations down there in Baton Rouge. Let's go to the team that he left. Pete Golding, elevated from DC to head coach in the playoff. They go on a little bit of a run to the semifinals. Trinidad Chambliss has sued and got another year of eligibility. Where do you have Ole Miss ranked in your top 25?
I have the Ole Miss Rebels right above the LSU Tigers at number 7. I think that week 3 game I will be in attendance is going to be absolutely pandemonium.
Yeah,
But getting off,
can't miss that one.
no, if you're just a general observer of interesting things, you shouldn't miss that one, let alone sports. But if Trinidad and Lacey, continue the trajectory they were on toward the end of last year. I think the defense is going to have that bend don't break identity. I think certainly they've bolstered up some of the depth there. I'm a little concerned about the offensive line, but that was also concerned last year. And they somehow made do and went 11-1 in the regular season, playing I thought was still a pretty tough schedule, going to Georgia, winning at Oklahoma. Regardless, Sean, I think Trinidad Chambliss and Keywan Lacey are top 5 like QB running back combos in the entire nation. I think that's going to win them a lot of damn games. So give me the Ole Miss Rebels at number 7.
All right, we have got 9, 5, and 2 left. 9 is a team, Joe, that made the college football playoff last year but lost to Alabama. Where do you see things for Brent Venables in Oklahoma going into the new year?
I have Oklahoma at number 9. I think John Mateer coming back and hopefully staying healthy the whole year is going to be the key to them making a longer playoff run and finally breaking that first 0-5 college football playoff record. This was a different team when he was healthy, and even like at times, even winning it against at Alabama and Tuscaloosa, this is a team that, because of its defense and the Brent Venables identity, it's not a question of the defense. It's purely going to be the offense. They added Cole Sullivan on defense. This is a roster that replaces its defenders the last 2 years extremely well from the portal. So it's going to be all on John Mateer. Can he stay healthy? That's really the question, Sean. He's shown an inability, particularly like in certain games, to not rely on his legs, and he can't do that for an entire season. He will get hurt or he will not be as effective and be hesitant to run in certain games. So I think for them, keeping Mateer healthy is going to be the key to them, winning a few games in the playoff.
All right, Joe, you've got 2 spots left, one of which is an SEC team. Sorry, we forgot about one of the teams at number 5.
Oh,
Number
we can't forget
2,
about that team.
no, very, very hard to do that with how much they like to talk about themselves. Number 2 in your list, I'm assuming your pick to win the SEC, that is Georgia. They complete your big 3 that you mentioned. Very, very heavy favorites to finish at the top of the SEC.
Yeah, Georgia's won 3 of the last 4 SEC titles. A lot of people forget that because they haven't had the national success that we've often, and rightfully so, paired Georgia with. But this is, I think, the best defense in the country, Sean. I think this is the most talented overall roster south of the Mason-Dixon. I think it could even be more talented than Oregon or Ohio State's. They Gunnar Stockton, right? This is a year he's just got to do it, right? I think Health has been. I think they've had a lot of bad luck, not even health wise, the last 3 years. In 2023, that fumble against Alabama, 2024, Carson Beck getting injured in the SEC title game, and then 2025, I think they've certainly been unlucky with injuries, but that's going to happen throughout a season. I really think Georgia should be number one. It's just the fact that I trust Dante Moore in Oregon a little more than Gunnar Stockton at this time. But I think Gunnar Stockton is one of the more overhated QBs in college football. I think with better decision making and better protection and when healthy, he can be a top 10 QB in this sport. I don't think that's a stretch. Some people might, but again, Georgia and Kirby Smart are probably the most known consistent commodity in college football since Saban retired. So gonna give Kirby and Georgia an extreme benefit of the doubt at number two.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks, or not a lot. There are some question marks among the other top teams in the SEC. We talked about they might not have that. And if it's the
Yeah.
quarterback who started every game last year and the playoff the year before, I think they can live with that. All right, last is Notre Dame, Joe. They come in at number 5 for you. A lot of discourse from them over the season, them not making the college football playoff. They now have a rule where if they finish top 12 in the final AP in the final college football playoff ranking, they will automatically be in. Not really sure what that does because if the committee doesn't want them in, they could just put them 13th. Um, but Notre Dame is your number 5 team. Joe, a lot of expectations yet again in South Bend.
Believe it or not, I think this is on the defense. I think that secondary of Leonard Moore is extremely talented. I don't even question CJ Carr anymore. I just wonder if the offense, you lose Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, the running game will, you know, it will. Why am I blanking on the word? It will not match the production. I think that's the
Yeah.
most non-offensive way I could put it. It will not match the production it did last year. And I think that could put a little more pressure on CJ Carr. I think a lot of games he was able to operate with a lot cleaner a pocket and a lot less coverage than prior. I think this year defenses are really going to test him. I'm not saying he's not ready for that. I just think it's going to take somewhat of an adjustment period, and I think people penciling him in for Heisman are a bit premature. I do think Chris Ash needs to do a better job with this defense. I think that's ultimately why they lost those two games last year that prevented them from being in the playoff ultimately. Right. What it's going to come down to is can this team just like handle business week in, week out? We saw even in the year that they, you know, made the college football playoff in 2024 all the way to the national title game. It's just been lapses in certain games in the Marcus Freeman era. That's been my biggest critique of him. I think he's done a phenomenal job. But in plenty of games, even going back to 2023, that last play against Ohio State, it's been the one critical play that's costed Notre Dame. It was the Texas A&M snap last year. It was Miami at several points last year. Does this team have enough fortitude to not make that mistake? And, they can't make it two times this year because with that schedule, that might be the death sentence for them.
So that is Joe's top 25. Um, you'll see a post about it. Obviously, if you want to hear it explained, you came here to watch. Please tune into the other video that we are about to record of me unveiling my top 25. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.